we did a little bit last week, but we're going to officially start from the top, going through these Maamarim, or this single Maamar of the Ramchal, broken into a number of pieces. As we mentioned last week, this Maamar of the Ramchal is, to a large extent, the bedrock of religious Zionism. This is where, like, the entirety of religious Zionism more or less comes from. The process of Geulah, as described by the Ramchal here in the Maamar HaGeulah, details. I mean, when the Ramchal wrote this, a few hundred years ago, there was not even an inkling that there would ever be such a thing as the state of Israel. The Ramchal lived in the late 1600s, early 1700s.
Who owned it?
What?
Israel. British?
This was under the jurisdiction of the Ottoman Turks. The Ramchal was the same dar, as there were three tzaddikim that lived in the same dar that changed the world and had nothing to do with each other, officially never met each other. The Ramchal, the Rechaim, and the Baal Shem Tov. They all lived at the same time, and they never met each other. At least, not physically. Although there's stories of the Baal Shem Tov and the Rechaim having some kind of communication. Not the Rechaim, Rechaim Ibn Attar. Wrote the popular commentary on the Torah, Or HaChaim. He lived first in Morocco and then made Aliyah, lived in Eretz Yisrael. And both Ramchal and the Or HaChaim were niftar without any sons, so a lot of their continuation was just in their writings. The Baal Shem Tov did have a son, but the majority of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings were passed on through his Talmidim. And their Talmidim, meaning all three of these, really didn't pass on through teachings and through students much more than through their own mishpachas, and there's a lot to say about that, but not for now.
They know each other though?
They certainly seem to have known of each other, at least to some way, shape, manner, or form. So the Ramchal was in Italy, the Baal Shem Tov was in Ukraine, Russia, and the Rechaim was in Morocco and in Eretz Yisrael. So we're talking about three totally different areas of the world. In the same generation, but not officially having anything to do with each other. When the Ramchal wrote this, most people assumed that the way that Mashiach would come and the way the Geulah would happen was that we would be in the midst of exile, and then Hashem would miraculously rescue the Jewish people out of exile, and we would float on eagle's wings to Yerushalayim, and the Beit HaMikdash would descend. That was, to a large extent, what I think most people davened for. When people thought about Geulah, that was what Geulah meant. Now, that's not what Geulah means in the Torah in general, and this is a lot of what the Ramchal is going to speak to us about. That's not what redemption ever looked like. Even in Mitzrayim, and we'll see specifically in Mitzrayim, there were stages of Geulah. There were stages of redemption. If you are careful in the reading of the Psukim, you'll see that there are stages of redemption. It doesn't all happen instantaneously. And what the Ramchal is going to describe here is not, necessarily current events. He's not telling you first this will happen, then this will happen, then this will happen, in terms of like politics and geographical and military conquest. What he's talking about is the 30,000-foot overhead layout.
How much time passed from the first mock-up to the last one?
We're going to get to all of that.
Oh, okay.
We're going to get to all of that, but
use that as a setup.
But it's not even a question of timing. It's a question of stages unfolding.
Phases.
Right. Yeah. Meaning there is a time that it takes for a baby to gestate, for a fetus to gestate and be born as a healthy living human child. That's usually roughly 9 months. But that happens to be the time that it takes. The far more important detail is that there are many things that are going on inside of the womb. Lots of things. And if one of those things doesn't happen or Khalil goes wrong, so then you might still have something at the end, but it won't be healthy. It won't be a healthy lebedik human baby. There are stages that have to happen. The Ramchal is going to describe to us that there are stages to Geulah that need to happen in order for Geulah to take place. And this is the template, if you will, of how Geulah happens. And the value of learning the Sefer is not just a deep understanding of how Geulah is going to unfold, or is unfolding, or to a certain extent, has begun to unfold already. But to understand that when we see things happening in the world, we shouldn't be alarmed. It shouldn't be something that we go, I didn't have thought about this. Yeah, I don't understand. There's no God in the world. When you see a perspective from 30,000 feet, it becomes far more palatable to understand what is happening, what isn't happening, and to be able to correct course, to bring things back to where they need to be if we're going off course. And to that end, we looked at a little bit of this last week, but we're going to see it inside for real now. I'm going to try hard to hold back from offering too much explanation, because we could spend a whole shiur on every line. And I'm going to try hard to hold back to not do that, because if we do that, we're not going to get to any broader level perspective. So if there's questions that we have, shkoyach. Oh, there we go. If there's questions that we have as we go, that's okay. Some of them we'll try answer on the spot, and some of them we'll answer as we go and as we develop. And Reb Noach, there we go. It's poured already for you, my friend L'chaim. Okay, says Ramchal as follows, and he starts like this, quoting the pasuk in Micha. And this, we saw a little bit of this last week, as we said, Al tisbechi oyavti liki nafalti kamti. Oh, my enemy, don't be so happy that I have fallen, for I have gotten up again. Ki yoshev b'choshech Hashem orli, though I sit in darkness, Hashem is my light. The Ramchal says on this pasuk, Sam wants to know where's the video. So hold on a second. We should send him the video.
The video is live. You should be here.
Right, that's true.
It's all a long time.
Sam is asking for the video, and now this is recorded, and this is what you afterwards you'll be able to edit it and clean it up and do whatever else you want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So it says like this.
Is there a good hook at the beginning?
No, you're gonna add all the zeh. Okay. So he says like this. It says like this. This pasuk tells you the secret of the bitachon, the faith that the Jewish people has, the assurance that we have, and our hope, that we will be entirely redeemed. This is the pasuk that describes it. He says as follows, explaining that there is, and this is what we mentioned last week, that there is a parallel. There's a lot of horrors that have happened to the Jewish people throughout Geulah, and there is a parallel reward that comes as a result of holding on through all of these trials and tribulations, through all of this hardship. Says the Ramchal as follows: there are many amazing things that happen in the process of Geulah. And these things are well known for people that understand what's going on in the world and that understand this truth. And when wisdom will be expressed and explained in the world, then people will recognize, will realize, will understand the amazing things that Hashem has done for us. He says, when the Jewish people thought, as we have many, many, many times throughout the exile, that Hashem has hidden himself from us, as panav mehem ve'azav, that Hashem has hidden his face from us, has abandoned us. He says, as hayamechin lahem tova ubracha, ki as hayamamale lahem otzros gedolim asher l'rachvam ein ketz v'legdulasam ein tachlis. During those periods of time that it feels like and it seems like, and we experience this immense hiddenness, the hiddenness of October 7th, which is 1% of 1% of 1% of 1 day in Auschwitz. It's hell. We're not minimizing. But whatever kashas we have from October 7th, we have 4 more from the Holocaust and the Crusades and the Spanish Inquisition and the Khamenei massacres of Tachvatat. And the Churban Beis Hamikdash, the hell and the horror that we have experienced for thousands of years. So there are many, 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 many times that it feels like Hashem has hidden himself from us. Says the Ramchal, you need to understand that despite all of that, which is true, there is something else going on behind the scenes as far as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is concerned. Now, that doesn't make it easier. And this book is not a book of theodicy, right? We're not trying to explain good and evil here. Ramchal is not acting as the Rebbeinu Shalom's advocate. He's not trying to explain away tragedy. He's saying, from a 30,000-foot perspective, there's something else going on, even though it's emotionally hell. And practically, realistically, there's havoc that's going on inside the hearts and minds and communities of Jews across the world. There's something else happening. It says, and in those storehouses of goodness that Hashem is preparing, it's impossible to imagine the infinity of reward and enjoyment that is awaiting us. Until these storehouses are filled to the extent that it's impossible to express it, it would be impossible to hear it, and impossible even to imagine. And when the time of rest comes, HaGeulah, the great time of rest, Ha'asida, that will be in the future, Ligalos ba'olam, that to be revealed in the world, Yiftechu kol ha'otzos ha'ela, Hashem will open up all of these storehouses, umehem yatzu kol minei machmadim, v'yinatnu liyisrael chelef avodasam hakasher she'avdu begalosam. Hashem will open these storehouses and we will experience all of the reward that we got from it. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but just to frame this appropriately. The Mishnah says in Peah, there's a siddur here. The Mishnah says in Peah, and this we said in the morning, this is these are the things that a person enjoys in this world, enjoys reaps the benefits, gets dividends, literally, right? You get dividends in this world, but the principle still is there for you in the world to come. Meaning everything that we do has principle and dividends. Says the Mishnah in Peah that there are certain things that you get, really it's a few different Mishnahs and Brises in Peah that are put together here, but there are some things that the reward that you get, the ultimate reward is still there for you, but you get dividends in this world. What are they? Kibud avayim, honoring your parents. Gemilas chasadim, doing kind things for other people. Ashkamas beis hamelech shachris v'arvis, going to shul early in the morning and late at night. Achnas zarchim, having guests over, bikur chalim, visiting the sick. V'achnas kala, helping to marry off a bride. V'halvayas hames, and attending to a funeral, to a cemetery. V'iyun tefillah, and paying attention to your davening. V'avas shalom min olam l'chavera, and bring peace between people. But Talmud Torah keneged kulam, and Talmud Torah is more worthwhile than all of these things, arguably within this rubric of you get schar in the next world and you get enjoyment in this world. I mean, there's certain things that when you do them, not only do you get cookies and shamayim for this, meaning you get the reward that there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes, oh, gewaldik, but you also enjoy and appreciate it here. There's lots of mitzvahs like that. Primarily mitzvahs ben olam lechavera. That's the majority of what's going on here. Or things that are, large elements of a person's day-to-day living, like going to shul morning and night. That has massive dividends in this world. It changes a person's life in a meaningful way. A person can feel that. That's what it means that you get the dividends here. A person that develops a good relationship with their parents, that visits the sick. So there's dividends. You benefit materially from those activities in this world. As opposed to, for example, putting on tefillin. Now, this doesn't sound so firm of me, but I don't know. I don't know how often, any of us feel the benefit of putting on tefillin. You might feel good about having put on tefillin. That's good. You did the right thing. But it's not usually the case that, you feel the benefit, like you feel the tangible benefit of putting on tefillin, the same way as, for example, going to a wedding.
To be honest, that's the way I feel about davening most instances.
Right. Davening is not on this list. You don't always feel that you've gained anything from davening. Now,
I agree with comparatively, like going to a wedding and Misamecha Chatamatala is like a different feeling than putting on film, but I think there is a benefit.
of course, there's a benefit.
Like on a mental level, on a
100%.
level, so that I think that you can feel it. Maybe it's a little harder.
Correct.
It's a little harder.
It's less tangible. Now. It happens to be, and I think I told the story before that there's certain tzaddikim, like the Chalban. I told the story once before. The Chalban had a Talmud, Chaim Cohen, had a Talmud that people figured out that the Chalban was like a somebody. The Chalban, Chaim Cohen, he officially was known as the milkman of Yerushalayim. He worked in a milk factory. He was a hidden tzaddik. In the last decade of his life, people started figuring out who he was. He passed away like 5 years ago.
Okay.
So
contemporary.
Yeah, very, very contemporary. He gave Shurim in like a little Saudi Beit Medrash in Yerushalayim, clean shaven, like wore like a little old school peak cap. He whenever he would teach, he would be reading from a page, and people were like, "What's he reading?" He was reading from his own sefer. He didn't want to say it out loud, but he wrote many Svarim, and he taught it from his own Svarim. So that to be humble, so as not to like be giving shirim, he taught his own sefer. But that notwithstanding, the Chalban once had a Talmud that came to him and said to him, Rebbe, some of the Chavim figured out that that you had a world of access to big tzaddikim and gedolim. Maybe they wanted to interview you for Yediot Achronot or whatever it was, an Israeli publication. And here, Sipuri Tzadikim. Can you tell us some Sipuri Tzadikim? So he said, sure. Tell him to come, during the lunch break at the dairy factory, and we'll share something. So he shows up at whatever 11:30 in the morning. This Talmud of the Chalban with the guy from Yediot Achronot, Datilo Mi guy, like Kippas guy, with a little recorder, whatever it was. So he shows up there. And the Chalban takes one look at him and he goes, "Where's your tefillin?" He goes, "What do you mean? It's like 11:30 in the morning. What do you mean, where's my tefillin?" He goes, "Where's your tefillin?" It's like, what do you mean? He's like, "I'm looking at you and there's no tefillin on you today. I'm like, I can see that you didn't put on tefillin. I'm looking at you, there's no tefillin." Well, what do you mean? He's like, "You didn't put on tefillin and you didn't have on chakras. It's missing from you. I'm looking at you, it's missing from your neshama. It's not there. It's vacant." So he looks at, and he was a very sweet guy, but he looks at his Talmud. He says to him, "And you, what are you doing bringing him here? This is dangerous for you. Taking him away instead of taking him to a shul, taking him to a mikveh. You should put on tefillin, you should daven." And then as it's like they're leaving, he looks at him and goes, "You wanted Sipurei Tzadikim. Now you've got a story." There's certain people that could see it. They could see it. Some people could see. Chaim Vital writes about his Rebbe Arizal, that Arizal looked at somebody, could tell right, left, up, down, everything that they had done or hadn't done in this lifetime, previous. It's possible to see it, and some people certainly felt it. But for the majority of us, and even for the tzaddikim, living in Olam Hazeh, we don't feel tefillin the same way that we feel hachnasas archim. You have somebody over for a meal, feels great, I'm doing a mitzvah, and I'm feeling, you gain from that experience, you gain tangibly, materially from that experience. Most of us probably would not feel the pain of wearing shatnez, mixture of wool and linen in our clothing. We probably wouldn't notice it. The Gemara's detailed stories of tzaddikim that even their animals were sensitive to the extent that they couldn't have non-kosher. But the Amoraim, even the animals of the Amoraim couldn't have anything that wasn't kosher. The donkey of Pinchas ben Yair, Pinchas ben Yair of Mesilas Yesharim fame, was not able to do Averos because it's property of a tzaddik. And that was felt, that was tangible. But for the majority of our lives, for most of us, this Mishnah tells us the things that we can feel. So where's all the enjoyment of all of those things that we did? Because Baruch Hu says if you do good things, you're going to enjoy. So in a world of Geulah, in a world of Beis Hamikdash, people felt these things in much more real ways. People felt their tefillin, and they felt their tzitzis, and they felt their shatnez. Not wearing shatnez. They felt these things. They were sensitive to it. In the world of Galus, we don't feel that. We don't feel the reward, and we don't feel the pain. So where's all of the reward? Says the Ramchal, when Geulah comes, don't think that everything that you've done, that you didn't feel, you were just like following orders. But you're never going to feel reward for that. All of that reward is there. It's just you can't feel it yet. When Geulah comes, you will be upgraded to feel it. Hashem will open it up for you. It's all going to be there. Hashem's going to open up, and all of the tefillin that you put on, you will feel it. Instantaneously. Instantaneously, you're going to feel all of that reward. Whoa. Even if you're half asleep in the shir, you're going to feel the schar of the Talmud Torah that we are doing right now. Even though Talmud Torah Keneged Kula, because the Keren Kayam L'Olam Haba, it's much bigger in that world. Much bigger there. Even though we enjoy it a little bit here, comparatively. But it's much bigger there. This is what the Ramchal is saying. Don't think that it's disappearing. And by the way, Chazal tell us, from Tzara Agra, the more pain that we endure in the doing of the mitzvahs, the more reward we are accruing. Now, that's not because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to put us through pain. It's the same way that a loving parent looks at their child and says, when you're struggling to do the right thing, I appreciate that more. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the same. Hashem doesn't want us to suffer. He doesn't want us to struggle. He does want us to grow. And everything that we have done, and certainly all of the things that we have done in the worst of circumstances, we've pushed through and held on, and every mitzvah that a Jew has done in this meshuggah world is worth infinite. Not just in the next world, not just in the amorphous, world of souls, but practically in this world, we will experience that. Now, when is this all going to happen? Says Ramchal as follows. The pasuk in Tehillim, which David HaMelech says, make us happy in accordance with the days of our suffering, the years that we saw evil. Meaning that there is some kind of parallel here. There is, in accordance with the suffering that we have undergone, Hashem, you should make us happy. He says, Ki kol hayomim shayisol begalus va'arloi nagalehem, all of the years that we have been in exile and the light of Hashem has not shone on us. Osa ha'ar haroila, osa mayomim loi avad. All of that light has not been lost. Ela kol ha'ar hahu haya hakadosh baruch hu ganza ba'ele ha'otzes she'amarti lecha. All of that reward is stored for us. Kshehaya hazman liftach osam az yotza kol ha'ar hahu ke'echad. And when the time comes, Hashem will open up those storehouses of all of the reward that we have earned. It's not free gifts. Hashem will give us everything that we've earned. And then we will experience reward and enjoyment like we've never experienced so far. And the world will be calm and chill and relaxed. And there will be no suffering in the world any longer. At that point in time, people will enjoy. When is this going to happen? What's the time period for this? So this is where the Ramchal starts drilling down into, Tafshin Pei Dalet, where we are holding right now. It says, don't think that this pasuk, Samchen Kimosi Nisana, Hashem make us happy, proportionality, yes? Proportional to the amount of suffering in years, meaning 1 year of galus to 1 year of enjoyment. He says it won't work like that. Why not? He says, Harei loy nishar b'sheshes halafim hashanim asher la'olam ki yomim she'ayinu begalus ad hayom hazeh. He says it doesn't work out. Because now, he says, we're sitting in the 1700s. It's already a while ago. We're sitting in the 1700s. we've already been in exile for 1600 years. And there isn't enough time for another 1600 years until the year 6000. So it cannot be a one-to-one correspondence. So what's the pasuk talking about? Elamai, what it means is that in whatever time is remaining, there will be enjoyment that will offset all of the pain and suffering that we have undergone. When does all of this happen? Before the year 6000. Meaning 2000 years of galus, and all of that pain, somehow or another, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give us in the 216 years between now and the year 6000. All of those 2000 years of suffering, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give us the reward for every single mitzvah that we didn't have during that period of time, is going to give us in the next 216 years. Right? That's what we got left.
I struggle with this as a concept.
Yeah.
Because, before I went to college, I read like a thing that's like a collection of works of Arthur Schopenhauer, right? As an atheist, I'm going to read weird German medievalist philosophy. And there was a really good line that he did have in there, right? Which was, life is more suffering than pleasure. How can you tell this? Try and reckon up the pain of an animal being eaten alive, which is the standard death for so many things, against the pleasure of eating an animal. And the pain will always outstrip the pleasure. And so just a given negative thing per pound is more potent than a given positive thing generally, right? In a marriage, one bad act is worth 5 good acts. It's like a way that like some marriage counselors refer to this stuff. So just thousands of years of negativity. And I understand in God, all things are possible, but as a practical matter of imagination, it's hard for me to imagine the scale of the suffering and negativity our people's been through. Holocaust, Crusades, the massacre in the East that I can't pronounce, Khmelnytsky,
yeah.
Okay. I was a Russian major, but that still eludes me.
It's Ukrainian, don't worry.
Let's see. All of that. All of that. Right, not even on a one-to-one scale of years, but in a compressed time frame, it's just hard to imagine.
You're 100% right, and we're going to get into some of the why it's hard for us to understand, and some of the how we could possibly imagine some of this. What's important to understand in general. I'll give a general framework to this, is that our inability to understand something is often as a result of our inability to, I'll say it like this, our experience doesn't seem to support that understanding. As you described, meaning our experience of life doesn't support an understanding that there is the possibility of far more pleasure than pain. It might already be true, but our experience is not true of it. And I'll give the following example. I've given this example in other contexts, and I'll explain that in a second as well. So from Rabbi Moshe Stav many years ago, and it stuck with me because it makes sense. And you'll tell me if you agree or understand what I'm saying with this. If you take an 8-year-old boy, I don't want to get too vulgar, but describe to an 8-year-old boy what the process of human reproduction is. They will tell you that that is the most disgusting thing they've ever heard.
That was my experience with my reaction at 8 years old. Yeah.
Right. That is the most revolting thing.
Gross.
Meaning, I wouldn't share a toothbrush with another human being, certainly not a girl, right? They have cooties, after all, right? I wouldn't share a toothbrush with a girl. You telling me that I'm gonna do that? That's unimaginable. And yet somehow or another, that same 8-year-old boy some 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, this is now the only thing he can think about. What happened? Something happened in his brain. Now, this thing, which was revolting, repulsive, impossible to imagine, is now so obvious that that's all that they're thinking about all the time. Now, here's the crazy part of this, is that the reality of human procreation has been occurring even in the 8 years of that boy's life. In fact, that's how it started. He's been looking around the world, like you tell that to him, you're like, I don't get it. Like, all of these people came from like that act. Don't understand it. That's impossible. And there's this cognitive dissonance that exists because experientially, that's revolting, that's repulsive, it's disgusting. But you're telling me that it's true. So from that perspective of a prepubescent child, it's impossible to imagine. And then all of a sudden, now it makes sense. Yeah. So this is how, if you take a look at the Maharal in the beginning of the Chaim, and Tzadok speaks about this, and the Geulah speaks about this. You find this in a number of places. When we think about the world of prophecy, which we have no understanding or inkling of what that is, or the world of Avodah Zarah, why do people want to bow to idols? Primitive, insane, ridiculous? Yeah. There were ways and modalities that people thought that make no sense to us, perspectives that people had, or perhaps even have, or maybe are beginning to have again, that are totally unintelligible to us. But if something clicks, then all of a sudden everything makes sense. So while it's true that from our perspective right now, none of this makes sense, we should hold off on our judgment of the possibility of it making sense to us, because it's entirely possible that at some point in time, something happens, and then all of a sudden it makes sense. The prime example, in the Maamar HaGeulah, the Ishbitzer points this out in Chumash. The prime example of this instantaneous switch happens when the beginning of Parshas Vayigash, a few Shabbos' time, when 10 brothers came down to Egypt looking for food. There is this insane, brilliant, charismatic, malevolent, and somehow or another benevolent dictator that is 2 steps ahead of them in everything that they're thinking. These brilliant sons of Yaakov, and like there's this despot in Egypt that is just stringing them along. And they're looking and going, oh my God, what is going on here? And then they bring Binyamin down, and then he sneaks a cup into the sack, and then he tells them, don't worry, I'm going to enslave you. And they're looking and going, oh my God, our world is falling apart. Nothing makes sense. There is no way that that we're ever going to get out of this. Like, this is it. And then all of a sudden, with 2 words, everything changes. The guy in front of them goes, Ani Yosef. I'm Yosef. And they all go, oh. And it wasn't just, oh, like, how could that be? It was, now everything makes sense. Everything that didn't make sense now makes sense. All of the things that just we had no idea how to tie up any of those loose ends, it like crashing down like a flood. Like, all of a sudden, now we get it. It says this, that will be the experience of Geulah. There will be a moment where something happens and we all go, oh. Now, we have pieces of this. What happened on October 8th in Israel was a little piece of that. And for the last 2 years in Israel, people will tell you that it has been more contentious and more litigious and more infighting and animosity amongst Jews than probably ever before in the 75 years of the state. People just at each other's throats. October 7th happens, and by October 8th, all of those divisions have dissolved. It doesn't mean that people don't still have their issues. But all of a sudden, the entirety of Israeli society was just like plugged in, upgraded. It's like, we were all idiots. Let's get along with each other. Because that's the only thing that's going to help us right now. And it's instantaneous. It's like this thing that happens like with a flash of inspiration. Now, an incredibly traumatic flash of inspiration. But a flash of inspiration, like, it happens instantaneously. So your question notwithstanding is a good question. How does it make any sense that there will be pleasure that will in any way answer the pain that we've experienced? And the answer is, from our perspective right now, I don't know.
So there's an element of gnosis.
Right. But something's going to happen. And by the way, he's not coming from nowhere describing this. He's going to explain where all of this comes from. All of this we're going to see in much greater detail. He says as follows. You need to know that the Exodus from Egypt and the redemption from Egypt and the future redemption follow the same template. They will follow the same template, not necessarily 10 plagues, Kinim, right? We're not necessarily splitting Red Sea. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking the template of Geulah, and then he's going to describe what are the ingredients, what was the Geulah in Mitzrayim. You're about to experience over the next little while what the Exodus from Egypt was on the level of 30,000 feet perspective. He says, and you need to know that what happened there will happen again. Differently, but following exactly the same rubric and template. Says but the future one will be even greater. Because then humanity will find peace and rest. We will come to a place of recognition and understanding that we have never experienced. Yitzhak Mitzrayim upgraded the Jewish people. But the future Geulah is going to upgrade the entirety of humanity. And then he gives a disclaimer. This is the asterisk at the bottom of the introduction here. It says, I'm going to explain to you a lot of what happened in Egypt and a lot of what's going to be happening. You'll see the wonders of the Rebbeinu Shalom. But I cannot go into greater detail right now because these things are incredibly lofty and very high and complex. And wise people know to not expand on these things. It says, therefore I'm going to be brief in my descriptions, yeah? And I'm going to give you all of the primary aspects, the pillars of understanding here. And then you will use your own intellect to understand more. The Ramchal is not he's not a spoon feeder here. He says, I'm going to tell you all of the chapter headings and I'm going to explain to you the methodology, and then you're going to figure this out yourself. And the Rebbeinu Shalom will give wisdom and understanding. Okay, this is the introduction. That something is going to happen, and somehow or another between now and the year 6000, monumental things will be changing, and we will experience it. This is what's important to understand, is that when it happens, you won't be confused that it's happening. You will know. You will feel it. Now, some of it we have already experienced, and we'll see some of these details. Some of these experiences we have already experienced. It's hard a little bit for us to put it into the context of our own short lives. But one moment of introspection, comprehension of the last 200 years of Jewish history, and I've made this point many, many times before, that if we would describe to any of our great-grandmothers the lives that we lead right now, they would say, you live in the times of Mashiach. The Messiah has come. If you told your great-grandmother that you are living in a beautiful home, in a beautiful community, that you have the ability and capacity to swipe a piece of plastic, get onto a metal bird, fly across the ocean, and pray at a sovereign Jewish Kotel Hamaravi, your great-grandmother would be, oh my gosh, Mashiach is coming, or has come already. and you're in the process of finishing redemption. So, while it might not be acutely possible for us to pinpoint the Geulah that we are experiencing, we'll see this in the Ramchal. It's very obvious, and you'll see this within the context of everything that we're saying, that we are currently living through at least some stage of this process. Where and when and how and who and what, I don't know. Well, like the Ramchal says, I'll give you the introduction and you figure out the rest. But that we're currently living in some of this, it's going to be hard to refute it. But Perek Beis begins with Kilkulei Hagalos, and this is important to understand because we have no idea what Geulah is because we have no idea what Galos is. Like they tell a story of two fish that are, swimming, two little fish, and they're swimming down a stream. This big older fish comes up to them and says, "Be careful. In the next 20 minutes, the water gets very cold." And the one fish looks at the other fish and goes, "What's water?" Right? Because when you live in it, you don't know what it is. So we know what pain is and we know what suffering is, but we don't know what Galus is because we don't know what Geulah is. We've never experienced redemption, so we don't know what exile is because we're living in exile.
A degraded form of relative comparison is to be a Baal Teshuvah and go from
Yes.
unself-conscious assimilated participation in a broader society or being a ger to now acutely taking on affirmative, distinct, profound limitations and separation from the surrounding people. And I would just say that the joke phrase that I have for my friends, right, because I'm very anti-Baptist and there's all this decolonization talk prior to 10-7 of just like, we're going to decolonize math, we're going to decolonize the writing curriculum, whatever. The joke I had with my friends is I had to de-Christianize my psychology because my understanding of religion was like Christianity, American bland Protestant Christianity, cultural Christianity is like the default, and then everything's a symmetrical comparison with that rather than realizing that different religions are profoundly asymmetrical from each other. Go figure. But just realizing that a lot of my psychological underpinnings related to religion, understanding of God, like just all this stuff was very widely Christianized, and I had to separate from that. And now I feel very foreign to the surrounding society in many ways that I used to be an unself-conscious part of. So just there is an element of coming from not feeling galus to traveling to Denver for business and not being able to eat anything besides like hard-boiled eggs that I got from Target and yogurt, going, oh yeah, if I wanted things to be convenient, I could not be in exile.
Right.
I could go to Israel. Then I wouldn't have to worry about whether or not things are kosher. But I feel acutely that I'm not in my own country.
100%.
As it should be.
100%.
Be over there.
So those experiences of exile, we absolutely feel. Mm-hmm. But what about the what does redemption really feel like? Mm-hmm. So like that's hard to put a finger on, and that's what the Ramchal is going to describe to us. Because in order
America, that's what it's going to
well be. Maybe
if America were all
right.
350 million.
So he's going to talk about it from the other side, meaning what does Geulah look like from Hashem's perspective? Like how does Hashem relate to us differently in a period of redemption rather than a period of exile? And that's a more curious question, as opposed to, how do we relate to Hashem? How does He relate to us? And how do we experience that relationship? Like, what does that feel like? What does that look like? What are the parameters of that? And to that end, we're going to see the beginning of Perek Beis, and we're probably only going to get a chance to see the beginning of the first major difference, and he's going to list 4. He's going to say, "Ve'ata avar lecha barishana kamal kilkulim garim hagalos." I need to explain to you what has gone wrong in exile, so that you can understand what Geulah is well. Because all of the things that are currently broken are going to be fixed. And here you will see immense, deep and profound wisdom. This is a profoundly Kabbalistic line. There is not a single small detail of anything that occurs in this world that does not have mountains of immense secrets to those that know the truth. Meaning, if you understood the world with a profound understanding of the truth of Hashem, you would understand that there is nothing that occurs in this world that doesn't have immense meaning and significance. Marshall, there was a microbiologist in South Africa that once told me that after spending a lifetime staring at specimens under a microscope, he cannot bring himself to eat at a shul kiddush. He just can't do it. He knows that it'll be safe, it'll be fine, it'll be okay. He's like, I know what's on the herring. I know it. It's like I can't do it. Can't do it. It's like I see these things all day. He looks at the herring and he sees, like, whatever. It's like I can't do it. I can't. Now,
does he eat pickles and pickles a lot?
I don't know.
Is anything that's just cured in vinegar?
That-
He's living.
Right. He definitely doesn't eat things that like other people handle. Now, it's like, I know that it doesn't make sense and it's all safe and it's all healthy and like life is good. But this is what the Ramchal is saying. Like, if you looked at the world through the eyes of a microbiologist, the world would be different. And if you looked at the world through the eyes of a Kabbalist, the world would be different. You would just see things differently. Like another Marshall parable, how this makes a little bit of sense. A number of years ago, Dr. John Gottman came to BRS. He did a shtickle seminar. Dr. Gottman is him and his wife are the world-renowned experts on marital satisfaction.
Where that
Right.
number 5 thing comes
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
So he did all the studies. Now it's interesting. His story is interesting because it says he wasn't interested in any of these things. His wife was like the psychologist part of it. He was the statistician, mathematician guy. Like he wanted to quantify stuff. So they ended up doing like these seminars where they started interviewing couples and like having them have arguments with each other. And he managed to break down the basic ingredients of being able to predict the success of a marriage within the next decade. Meaning, what's the percentage chance of a marriage falling apart and getting divorced within the next decade? He managed to nail it down to 5 emotions that are quantifiable and noticeable. And then even more so, this was an amazing finding, to 1 emotion that, if displayed to a certain rate within a conversation, leads to a 90% chance of divorce within a decade. That emotion was disdain. And he also noted that at this point in time, he can look at a clip of a couple having a fight for like, I think it was like 5 seconds, 15 seconds, and be able to make that prediction on the spot with 90% accuracy. It's an astounding thing to be able to do. I'm probably mixing up a couple of those numbers and whatnot, but I'm saying, like, he's at this point in time, after seeing tens of thousands of couples having fights and filming them and analyzing those things, he can look at a couple having a conversation and be like, you should probably fix something, otherwise this is going to be ending in divorce in the next decade, or shorter or long. I mean, like, when you have that level of not just intuitive experience, but just scientific data that's backing up the training that you have and spotting like the Sherlock Holmes of like noticing that thing that's it. Says Ramchal, if you understood the world with that precision, you would know that there's nothing meaningless. And there's old Gemaras. The Gemara says that there's not a single blade of grass that doesn't have a malach that Hashem has sent to tell that blade of grass to grow. Meaning that everything is part of the broader perspective of the will and world of Hashem. And so he says as follows: Da, you need to know kilkula agalos rabim heim, that there are many things that are wrong in the world of exile. V'nimtzu nichlalim b'daled rashim. And there are 4 general categories. And we're just going to take a look at the beginning of the first one, because the first one is fairly long and we're not going to be able to get into all the details. But just for the next 3 or 4 minutes to define what this is. He says, Ha'echad nisbar, we'll pick up reviewing from this again next time. But just to give you the beginning of it. It says, Ha'echad nisbar b'pasuk v'anoichi astir panai b'yom hahu. This is the terrifying pasuk. In Devarim, Hashem says, I will certainly hide my face. Haster astir panai. I will doubly hide my face on that day. Hashem says that there's something called the hiding of Hashem's face. Now, anybody that knows anything about Torah and certainly anything about the Rambam knows God doesn't have a face. So what does it mean that Hashem is hiding his face? Playing peekaboo? What does it mean that Hashem hides his face? Clearly, there's something called the face of Hashem. We reference this many, many, many times in Chumash.
Wouldn't this be mankind's ability, like a man's ability to be consciously aware of Hashem's presence or interaction with things?
So,
Like it feels like, what is it? It said about Esther that God's presence is felt maybe implicitly in Esther. He's not direct and apparent in Esther, and that's a very defining feature of that narrative as compared to other narratives of the Jews.
So to a certain extent, we're talking more about Shekhinah and Chen in that context. And there is it's going to come to the experiential part as far as we're concerned, like everything does, because like the Rambam says, we have no ability to define God vis-a-vis God. We can only describe our experience and interactions.
Isn't it more of what we feel is true
Mm-hmm.
and right? And when things aren't, that's, from our perspective, that's when Hashem is hiding his face.
Right, but what does it mean that Hashem is hiding his face? Meaning he makes it impossible for us to feel something?
Maybe relating back to what you mentioned earlier about theodicy, like the hiddenness of 10-7 or other events.
So that's in the negative. What does it mean? I'll ask the question in the positive. What does it mean that Hashem will show you his face?
I would expect this to be like God just related to us in ways that we can understand. So if you told me I'm going to hide my face and then you're going to show me your face, like whatever that would mean to me in that situation is the same situation here.
So
And God showing his face is like, not to keep using this example, but post 10 October 7th, people coming together, that's Hashem showing his face.
So
The October 7th.
yes and no. And this is the part of what we don't get because we're in exile. We know what it means to not be miserable. But what's the opposite? And this is important. So we'll see the first piece here. He says, "V'zeh soid gadol ma'od." This is an immense secret. Because Hashem created the world. Ma'oris means spheros, and we're not going to get into the details of them. But Hashem created the world in such a way that he should be able to give good things to the world. Hashem wants to give good things to the world, and specifically good things to us, his children. He wants to give Klal Yisrael good. He wants us to experience the best. Ve'al kain, and therefore, heim kula meirim ze bazer meirim ba'anfehem. All of these different pieces of light, so to speak, and we're speaking metaphorically here, of course, reflect and refract off of each other, coalesce into a experience that is a flow of enjoyment and understanding and happiness and bliss and success. And that's what Hashem wants to give us. Teda, he says, you need to know, Shekol habriya hi anaf hama'aris, that all of creation is a branch of these lights of Hashem, meaning it's all an expression of the will of God. Kol hamalachim v'chol bnei ha'adam v'chol habriyas kulam, all angels and all people and the entirety of existence are expressions of the will of Hashem. We are all part of this flow of the will of God. And when these lights that Hashem has created, these potential for enjoyment and success and bliss and success and love and friendship and financial economic prowess, when all of this is tuned appropriately, then all of the windows, so to speak, are open. And then there is this increase of goodness in all things, and then there's no pain and suffering in the world. If you would imagine for a moment like what the perfect day looks like, where everything goes right, where all the lights are green, and the weather is beautiful, and you're feeling amazing, and everything that you tried to do was just successful in the first shot, and you felt a sense of providence and support and love, you feel limitless. I want to keep going and growing and doing and building and moving and shaking and enjoying and fulfilling, because everything is attuned, everything is working well, like a well-oiled machine, right? At that point in time where everything is appropriately tuned to everything else, it means that all good things reflect off each other. That when somebody is having a great day, that experience reflects off of them to somebody else, so that they also have a great day. And then that shines back on them, and there's no glitches, there's no gaps. Things just seem to work. One can imagine that happening. Like, you see this sometimes in sports, where like somebody will like describe themselves as like, once in a career I had a perfect game where everything worked, right? Everything worked. All of the things that we put into play, they just worked. It's like an example of what's possible. Improbable in a world with lots of complicated nooks and crannies and egos, but possible. Says Ramchal, when Hashem is shining his face at the world, and this is the bracha that we say in Birkas Kanim, Ya'er Hashem panav elecha vichuneka. Hashem should shine his face towards you, should illuminate his face towards you. What that means is when Hashem is, so to speak, illuminating all of these pathways. So there's lots of things that Hashem brings into the world all the time. There's money, and there's power, and there's love, and there's friendship, and there's enjoyment, and success, and peace, and harmony, and safety, and security. But these things don't bounce off each other well. Somebody will be experiencing something good, and then it'll not jive with somebody else's bad day, and then the whole thing is destroyed. Says Ramchal, when all things are attuned appropriately, everybody is having a good day all the time. Now, this is something that is a unique feature of the Jewish view of the future. And we've noted this before, that Christians have no idea of what utopia is supposed to be. It's very boring once there are no more poor people, and there's no and there's nobody to convert to Christianity. So what do you do all day? Like what's the plan? What are you supposed to do morning, noon, and night? Like none of that. For us, no. This is the beginning. When everything works well, so now we can do stuff. Now we can grow, we can learn, we can experience, we can enjoy. we can develop, we can share, then my unique personality and your unique personality, my unique perspective and your unique perspective don't fight with each other. They work in collaboration. One of the greatest, we mentioned this, I think, a week or 2 or 3, I don't remember, that one of the greatest inventions of the modern economy is the possibility of growing an economy. That it's possible for an economy to grow. For the vast majority of human history, it didn't exist. Economies were limited, meaning if I ate bread, you didn't eat bread. There was no such thing as my business being successful and your business being successful. If we were competitors, it meant that I outcompeted you, or you outcompeted me, or we both starved. But the possibility of me creating a market and you joining that market and growing that market didn't exist. The idea of a growing economy didn't exist. This is a new thing that humanity has figured out. It's a marvelous invention. That it's possible that we can gain more through collaboration than competition. So, what a chiddush. This is new. This is new to the world. It sounds so simple to, Toshin Peidal in the United States of America.
Leftists still think everything's done.
Okay. But there's a possibility. Now, by the way, we'll get there when we speak about this inside of Rav Kook. Rav Kook describes in the introduction to Shabbos Aretz, his work on Shemitah, is that there will come a time where it's possible that growth will not need to be achieved through competition. It could be achieved through collaboration. Meaning, what we have now is we use the Yetzer Hara of competition in order to grow. But potentially we could get to a point where socialism wouldn't lead to stagnation and laziness. It could lead to people working really, really well together to grow and build more. Is that he concedes that that's impossible in the world as we live in today, which is why you only have 1 year of Shemitah and 6 years of work. That's what you need. But you need the 1 year of Shemitah to remind you that collaboration is possible, right? Right. Oh. But wrapping up, Chavra, this is the Nakuda here. This is the point that Ramchal is making here. Is that there is a possibility of Hashem turning his face towards humanity to the point that everybody has a good day all the time. That's a possibility. And we're going to describe a little bit how this goes wrong and where the faults and flaws and cracks come in, and then how these things are going to get fixed. But this is 30,000 foot. What's wrong with the world right now is that Hashem wants to give us good stuff, and he is. It's just not filtering through. I'll leave you with this. To a certain extent, this is what Chachamim mean, and there's a lot more to say about it, that the sun and the moon were supposed to be equals, and the moon was diminished. What's the diminishing of the moon? The Mir Talavana is that the moon doesn't always reflect the light of the sun fully. In fact, most of the time, it doesn't. There's only 1 day of the month that the moon fully reflects the light of the sun. Sometimes it's impossible to see, and sometimes it's just a sliver. But in a Geulah world, the light that is shone is reflected 100%. That's what the Chacham mean when they talk about the Mir Talavana. The shrinking of the moon means the inability to reflect that which one is receiving. And this is L'chol Orech HaDerech. This is the challenge of a student understanding everything that their teacher taught them, a parent being able to fully give over to their child the wisdom and understanding and business acumen and perspective and philosophy that they have built in their life, the inability to shine and reflect with totality, that's the brokenness. And there is a possibility of full moon. That's why the Geulah is referred to as the full moon. That's where reflection is complete. Where the light that is coming in is filling up the receptacle totally, and that's shining full. We will continue next Monday night. Shkoch to the Chavra that have been following online. Feel free to Send in any questions and come in person next time.